Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our latest installment of Let's Talk Mental Health Trumbull. I'm Melissa McGarry from TPOD, Trumbull's Prevention Partnership, and I'll be your meeting facilitator. As we've done in the last sessions, we are running this as a webinar. So if you do have any questions during Jody's presentation, you can just type them into the Q&A, and we will either, Jody will either address them as they come up or at the end. So we'll also have time for Q&A at the end. So I'm going to hand this over to our first selectman, Vicki Tesoro, to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, and good evening, everybody. I hope you all had a happy and healthy summer. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our fifth installment of Let's Talk Mental Health Trumbull. Once again, I want to thank all of the town organizations who have been involved in planning these sessions. Trumbull PTA Council, Trumbull EMS, Mary J. Sherlock Counseling Center, Lakewood Trumbull YMCA, My Friend Abby, Progressive Institute, Trumbull Community Television, and TPOD, Trumbull's Prevention Partnership. We are recording these sessions and they will be made available on demand by Trumbull Community TV and on the TPOD website. Many Trumbull residents of all ages grapple with anxiety. Since the beginning of this series, parents and caregivers have asked us to address this important topic. It is our hope that through tonight's program, we will shine a light on the challenges of anxiety and give you all practical steps you can take to move forward. Tonight, we're pleased to welcome our speaker, Jody Aymond. Jody is a licensed clinical social worker in the final stretch of a doctorate program at Simmons University. She has worked as a psychotherapist for over 25 years with teens and families, helping them heal from trauma, understand the world, and build confidence in themselves. Because she is an anxiety survivor and a mom of teens, you'll feel she totally gets you. In her YouTube channel, Jody Aymond Live, her TEDx Wilmington talk, Calm Anxious Kids, and her award-winning book, Anxiety, I'm So Done With You, Jody shares how Generation Z can ditch anxiety and depression and hardwire their brains for sustainable happiness. So welcome, Jody.
Thank you so much, Vicki. Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to be here in front of you. We planned this a long time ago, and I've been looking forward to it. Because I'm in my doctorate program, I've had a little hiatus in speaking events, and it's been about 6 months. So I may or may not be rusty. I'm not sure, but I'm really pumped up for tonight because this message really needs to get out. First, want to say that I come from the unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee people, which is modern-day Rochester, New York. So I'm not too far away. I'm a neighbor to you all in Connecticut, and wherever you are, wherever you're watching this broadcast. So I'm also have notes, but that's to respect your time. So you might see me look down, but I'm totally here with you. All right, so we are going to cover two things tonight. And the two things we're going to cover tonight is how did we get here? Like, why is this a problem? What is going on? How did this happen? How did anxiety just, become so infiltrated into all of our lives? How many of you, we all know someone who's struggling with anxiety, and most of us are struggling with anxiety ourselves. And so what is happening? I'm going to cover that. And the second part is I'm going to talk about what we could do about it. Because I just don't want to leave you in this hopeless feeling that there's nothing we could do. This is why we have anxiety, and then that's just it. No, actually understanding why anxiety is such a problem is actually the way we're going to take that information and use it. And I'm going to give you some doable steps that you could take, because anxiety is highly treatable. And if you've been told something else, that anxiety is not highly treatable, or like brains are just wired that way or something like that, that's not true. That is an old discourse that has maybe been around for a long time. And maybe people are still telling you that. That doesn't mean it's true. Actually, the research shows that it's highly treatable, and it comes out of a context. That's what you're going to learn tonight. So let's talk about how we got here. And feel free, if there's something you need clarity on or you want something, you could write a question while I'm talking. And I will get to it as soon as I can get to it, or especially if you're trying to get clarity, because if you are confused about something I said, maybe other people are too. So I can handle it. Go ahead and put a question in there. But I'm going to leave time at the end also to ask any question that you want to ask. So we'll probably talk for an hour and we'll have question and answer time for about a half hour at the end tonight. All right. So how did we get here? Well, basically, the way we live now is not how our brains evolved for us to be living. And so that's the talk. All right. Any questions? That's the whole thing, is like the way our brains evolved over millions of years is we didn't evolve for the life that we are living now. And so let me break that down a little bit for you. I was just joking about that. So we have Generation Z, we're talking about young people. We're talking about anxiety in teens. I wrote this book for teenagers because it has become such a problem. And if you're a parent, if you're an educator, if you're a therapist, or if you're a young person yourself on listening to this video, you know that this has been it's startling how much it's become a problem. And, and you think about, is it because of the COVID pandemic? Is it because of phones? What happened? And really, yes, all of that. But first of all, it's like it was happening before smartphones. Smartphones are phones that we used to call smartphones because there used to be phones that didn't hook up to the internet. And now all the phones hook up to the internet. But Generation Z is defined by the fact that they had smartphones from about junior high. Most of their peers had smartphones in about junior high, were connected to the internet. And the reason why that's significant that the phones were connected to the internet is because you spend more time on them than you did when it was just calling or just texting. We spend more time there. And obviously with social media, that's increased multifold. So that's a difference. About 97, 98 is when millennials are kind of transitioning into the Generation Z. And we are noticing a significant difference. Now, it doesn't mean that other generations are not struggling with anxiety, because if you're any age, you know that you're feeling it too, just like everybody else, but it is increased. So with our phone use has increased, and then COVID came along, multiplied that again. So it's not just COVID, it's not just the phone. We were going in this direction, but those were exponentially multiplied. And I'm going to explain exactly how, because it's nice. It's not nice. Anxiety is not nice at all. Very, very, not very nice. But the mystery of anxiety. So when you have anxiety, you're like, I don't know how this came. Why is this here? What's it doing? That mystery gives it so much power. So what we're going to do in understanding it is we're going to demystify it, because when we understand exactly what it is and exactly what it's doing, then we really can't be afraid of it anymore. It needs you to be scared, and it needs you to think that it's out of control and mysterious and you have no idea and you have no control over it whatsoever. So when we understand where it came from and what we're doing, then mystery is gone and most of our fear goes away, actually. So I have 6 steps, or 5 or 6, depends on what document you're looking at, but about 5 steps to getting rid of anxiety. So my book covers 5 steps to getting rid of anxiety. And the first one is understanding anxiety. And I want to say in my work, in the last 25 years working with people and helping them get over anxiety, this takes about 50% of anxiety gone. About half of it's gone just by understanding it, because anxiety uses its mystery to try to get power over you. All right. So, what's so significant about phone use, or what's so significant about modern times? So in modern times, we have so much conveniences that we have less need for survival skills. right? We get our food right at the store. We have a lot of appliances that does a lot of the work that early humans had to do, or even 50 or 60 years ago had to do. We don't have to do that stuff. So we have a lot less stuff that we need to survive to do. And so that's how it started, right? Because our brain evolved for millions of years to solve problems all day to keep us alive. And we don't have as many problems to solve. And so our mind is going to look for some. You're starting to get it, right? So our mind's going to start looking for problems because it's like, we got to keep her alive. We got to find what the problems are. I don't see any. I got to find some. And that's how, those lies of anxiety start to come, and we start to, this must be something. All right. So that is kind of the beginning of it, is that there's less chores to do. And then the next thing that comes is the phone. And with the phone, the reason why the phone exponentially has increased anxiety is because it's decreased our understanding of cause and effect. So, some people argue that maybe like the electromagnetic is bothering our brains, or somehow we're not interacting with each other. Yes, there's all of that stuff going on, and there's lots of research to that stuff. But my take is that there's three things that our phones, three messages that come through our phones in all kinds of ways. Three very important messages that come through our phones that make us feel powerless, make us feel worthless, and make us feel out of control. And they are, other people are better than you. So we're constantly getting this message that other people are better than us. Number two is the world is a dangerous place. And number three is you deserve cool stuff just because. And I'm going to explain those. So the first one is other people are better than you. So with the advent of social media, of course, our comparison culture has exponentially exploded, right? We see people online and their lives looks perfectly happy, wonderful, beautiful. Of course, it's filtered. And we don't see all the hard work it is to get there. We don't see their messy background. We see their highlight reel. And it's just too easy to compare ourselves. So the more young people and our age and every age are on social media, the more they're comparing themselves. And when you compare yourself, you're always going to assume that you're less than, because you see what the people post, right? You don't see all the other stuff and everything it took to get there, and all the other times in their life that are not going well. You're seeing this one picture. And of course, I know people do share the negative parts of their life too, and people are really open with some of their struggles, but still, even comparing that they're doing those struggles better than you or whatever, it really just invites that. And so we don't see cause and effect. We just see this is how people are, right? It's missing from that formula. So the second one is the world is a dangerous place. So in human history, when we saw something traumatic, we were present. And so we used our adrenaline, we used that anxiety or that fear response that came up to do something, to get safe, or to help our community, or do something, right? Now we see horrible, tragic things happening from very far away, and there's nothing really we could do but sit on our couch and feel helpless. And that helpless feeling actually kicks up the anxiety because it feels very out of control to feel helpless. So the last one, so other people are better than you. The world is a dangerous place. We're getting these messages all the time. And the third one is you deserve cool stuff just because. And this is one maybe you never heard of before, but all of these companies are trying to sell. And now they have access to your eyeballs all the time, right? From the phone. And so they're trying to sell. And now if companies said you have to work really hard and then you could buy our product, they're not going to sell a lot of products, are they? No, they're saying you deserve this because this is cool, and you deserve this just because, right? Because they just want you to think that you deserve it. Now, this message is, you think, oh, we're not that stupid. No, we're not that stupid, but we're infiltrated constantly with this message that you just deserve stuff. You should get it because it's cool and everyone should get it, right? We're constantly bombarded all day long with that kind of message. And so that's not reality though. We do have to work hard to get stuff. Like we have to earn things. That's the cause and effect, right? We have to do stuff and work hard to earn something that we might want. But we've lost that concept in these messages, in these marketing messages. And what happens is that people actually can't get stuff because you don't just get stuff just because you have to pay for it. And so when they realize they can't get stuff, it actually affects how they see themselves. They feel unworthy because that's what they're being told, that if you don't get it, you must not be worthy because you should deserve it. And they don't know why. And so they just keep concluding the same thing, like they just feel helpless. They don't know what to do about it. So we're losing, so this is like subliminal maybe a little bit, but we're losing this concept of cause and effect, that we have to do something to get something, or we impact the world with our actions and then get the results we want. And so when you feel like things happen and you have absolutely no control over those things, what's going to happen? You're going to be really afraid of something going wrong. Anxiety shoots up. And so when we really aren't embracing that concept or understanding the concept of cause and effect, we don't see our own agency. We don't realize that we are an agent in our life and that we have skills actually. And people, young people, old people, every age, young people have incredible skills because they have the same brain that evolved for millions of years to adapt. Humans are highly adaptable and we know how to solve problems. And we're really amazing at it. And so the thing is when you're not doing it all the time, when you're not being challenged or trying to figure things out or doing things all the time, you don't get to see that. So if you're a young person or if you're a parent or if you're an educator, these young people are incredibly skilled and you are incredibly skilled. We just have to remind them that they are. Because there's no messages coming from here, which is where they're getting a lot of their messages, that they don't have the skills. They don't. That's not reflected back to them. So we have to do that. We have to reflect that back to them. So all of these messages are making people feel powerless. They're making people feel worthless, and they're making people feel out of control. And a lot of you think of those as symptoms of anxiety, right? But they're actually causes of anxiety. So when we feel powerless, then we feel, oh no, something bad might happen, and I don't have power to stop that bad thing happening. So it's a cause of anxiety, if that makes sense. Anxiety itself comes out of context. So it doesn't come from an illness. Some people have anxiety in their illness, and some people don't have anxiety. No, anxiety comes out of a context, and it could come out of a context of our life. Like if we have a difficulty or some trauma, or even something as simple as like if you have a flu, sometimes it triggers someone to have some anxiety. So sometimes people are like sick one day in the car because they have a actual virus or something. And then they start to get afraid of the cars, going in cars. So it could be something very, very simple. It doesn't have to be big T trauma or anything like that. It's very, very, very easy for anxiety to start to spiral. So it's not a weak person. It's not a person who can't handle life. It could happen to anybody. And that's an important message, because when people feel that anxiety, they think that they're different. They think they blame themselves, so they don't know how they did it, because they would never, want that for themselves. But mostly when people are going through anxiety and depression, they're blaming themselves, and they're very upset because they feel like they're different than everybody else. But first of all, they're not, because most people are experiencing this anxiety and depression right now. So if we thought about anxiety as a context, and we thought about anxiety as understandable, and we understood why we had anxiety, then we wouldn't be so distracted by what's wrong with me. Why am I different? Why do I have this? That why, that mystery of anxiety, that why, that makes us feel more and more out of control. And so if we're not distracted by that, then we could do something about it. So I like to teach kids the why. I like to teach adults the why, because when we do, so if you're an adult watching this, we need to teach kids why. So if your young person's not watching this, you could show them a replay. But if you're watching this, that is your job, is to explain to them what is going on in their mind and why this is happening, because I promise you that's going to really help them feel so much better. They're not going to feel as crazy, because anxiety wants you to feel crazy. Because when you feel crazy, you feel less than, you don't trust yourself, and anxiety could continue to reign in your life. All right. So, and if they understood why, they would, we get really caught up in negative self-judgment towards ourselves. And that, again, is a huge distraction from healing, huge distraction from healing. when we're so focused on like, I am terrible, I'm stupid, I am weak, I can't figure this out, all that stuff. That negative self-judgment is actually one of the biggest culprits of anxiety as well. Something that really keeps it in your life. All right. Like I said, there's 5 steps to getting rid of anxiety. And the first one's understanding it. Because anxiety really needs you to be afraid. And I'm going to tell you why, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the biology of anxiety. So part of understanding anxiety is understanding the biology. And I know a lot of you know this. When I started teaching this online about 15 years ago, no one talked about this stuff. But now with polyvagal theory and a lot of the brain stuff, like we really are understanding, we're talking about the amygdala. I remember 15 years ago, I was telling this, she was a nurse. And I was like, yeah, the amygdala is what triggers the anxiety. And she's like, amygdala, that's like a made up word. You're a nurse. But now we all know this word amygdala. And we all know that it releases the adrenaline. But I'm going to tell you some things, hopefully, or maybe you haven't heard of yet. And if you haven't heard of it yet, I really want you to know this part. Some of it you have heard of. All right. So the amygdala is this tiny almond-shaped cluster in the middle of the brain, right? This is the reptilian part of the brain. So this is like less evolved than our mammalian part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. So the amygdala is what triggers the fight and flight response, the adrenaline. And it works on emotional memory. And the reason why it works on emotional memory is because it's faster. So if we are triggered by something, and it could be something in our senses, or it could be a thought, our emotions tell our amygdala that there's some danger somewhere. So you know how it feels like anxiety comes out of the blue sometimes, or maybe if you don't have anxiety, if someone has told you that before, that anxiety feels like it just comes out of the blue, which is so scary. It doesn't come out of the blue. There's always a trigger, but the fact is that the trigger is often emotional, so we're not cognizant of it. And so it feels like it comes out of the blue, because what happens is when you have that emotional memory, your body nanoseconds kicks up the adrenaline. So it goes to all of your large muscles and your body is buzzing, right? Who's felt that before? So your body's buzzing with all this adrenaline, like immediately. And then the amygdala sends the message to the prefrontal cortex and says, something's wrong, find out what's going on. So what's supposed to happen is the prefrontal cortex is supposed to look around, and if everything's okay, it says back to the amygdala, everything's fine, we're good. Doesn't always happen that well, does it? Because what happens is what's happening in modern times is the amygdala is going off, the body's buzzed, with adrenaline, totally ready to like run around the house. And so the message goes to the prefrontal cortex and it says, something's wrong. Tell us if we're okay or not. No, the amygdala sends that adrenaline in case there's a problem, not because there's a problem. It sends it in case there's a problem. If the cortex decides that you're in danger, it already has the power to do something. And it's kind of cool. I mean, adrenaline, if you think about it objectively, of course, because subjectively it feels awful, but objectively, it's kind of cool that we have this basically superhuman strength if we needed it to survive or take some action to do something. So if you think about it like that, it's like, it is a cool feature that we have in our life. I like to flip the switch on it because it's so terrible, but it's kind of cool. So anyway, so it sends the message to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex looks around and says, like, is everything okay? And it's like, I don't see any danger, but I feel it. So keep pumping those hormones out. That's what's happening in modern times. So our amygdala is pumping the hormones and the prefrontal cortex is like, I don't see danger, but like, I feel it. So it must be here. I got to find it. If you ask the prefrontal cortex to find a problem, it'll find the problem, right? It'll come up with something because it needs to, or else it thinks it's going to let you down by like, you might die in this danger. And there's no danger, right? 98% of the time, or maybe even higher at this point, 98% of the time when your amygdala goes off and your body floods like that, there is no danger. So if right away that mammalian brain said to the amygdala, nope, I don't see danger, we're fine. It only takes a couple seconds for the amygdala to stop the adrenaline. What happens is it kicks off this other hormone called GABA. Now the GABA hormone puts the brakes on the adrenaline. And so it's really, really awesome. Now, I hope you're all following me. Ask me a question if you need to, and I'll answer it. I don't see any questions yet. So that's happening. But what happens is like in evolution, this message pathway from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex has been fine, not so fine, perfect. It's like perfect and efficient. It works like so well because you needed it to survive. So of course it created and evolved to be something really perfect and streamlined. But the message pathway from the prefrontal cortex back to the amygdala, we don't need that to survive. So it does not have the same perfection as the other way around. And so we have to do the heavy lifting. We have to consciously tell the amygdala that everything is okay. And so I have a script that I tell people to use. And the script is, thanks, amygdala. Like we're flipping the script here, right? Because usually it's like, no, I don't want anxiety. Like it feels so awful. You just like, oh, I hope it doesn't come. I hope it doesn't come. I hope it doesn't come. Right? That's usually the record that's playing. I hope I'm not triggering anyone. But instead be like, thanks, amygdala. If I needed you, that'd be really awesome, but I don't need you right now. I'm okay. Right? So we have gratitude, we're a little bit light, we're a little bit silly, right? Because the silliness, the laughter is increases your neuroplasticity, and it's going to help that message get through. So you want to be able to like, thanks, amygdala. It'd be really cool if I could lift a car off someone right now, but I don't need you. I'm safe. I'm okay. And so if we do that override, the adrenaline, the GABA will kick in and the adrenaline will ease really quickly. It's really interesting. Did you ever be in a room and you had earphones on or something and someone startled you from behind and you like jumped and screamed or something like that, but then you both laughed because you realized it's like someone in your family and it's kind of really funny. You had that shocking reaction. You feel the adrenaline in your body, don't you, in those kind of times? But because you're laughing, because you know everything's okay, you know why you have the adrenaline, it goes away pretty fast, doesn't it? Like really, really fast, it goes away. That's how fast your adrenaline will go down. That's how fast the GABA works if you're not afraid of the adrenaline. One of the things that adrenaline does, yes, it goes in your body to do that, but it also puts some energy up into your mind to look for that problem. So we have a lot to override here. So I understand it. And I'm not saying, oh, this is easy, no problem, but it's hard. It's a practice, But when you are not afraid of the adrenaline, you're like, oh yeah, I know why I feel like that. Like it comes all the time. But thanks, amygdala. If I needed you, that'd be great. I don't need you right now. And if we did that over and over again, those things that trigger us that we don't need to trigger us anymore will stop triggering us. We actually go over it in the book. Like you can, the amygdala lays down memory when something happens that scares you. The amygdala lays down memory and it becomes a trigger. So when something similar to that, when you have emotion that is familiar like that other time, then it kicks off your adrenaline. And there's some things that are not dangerous that has repeatedly kicked off our adrenaline. Maybe it's sitting in a classroom. Maybe it's being called on. Maybe it's even doing homework. Maybe it's being in a car. A lot of things. Maybe it's being away from somebody who you're afraid to be away from. Those things, or maybe it's nighttime. Maybe it's food. Anyway, some things trigger the amygdala because that's what it thinks it needs to do to help you, but we doesn't need to do that. And so you can untrigger it. And I go over that so you could get yourself a copy of the book if you wanted to go deeper into that, because I'm going to keep moving on because I want to get you as much as I can tonight. I'm glad there's no questions. I hope that means that I'm very clear and I'm giving you what you want. So yeah. Usually on Zoom, you can see some people, but anyway. All right. So, I'm only like on the second page here. I got lots more to go. All right. So this is another factor here. Another factor when we're talking about young people that comes up a lot. So I'm going to explain it to you because this is a really important piece of this whole puzzle here. Motivation. We're going to talk about motivation and then its relationship to anxiety. And so I could really explain what is going on. So back to the brain, because it all comes down to this brain, right? If we really understood what our brain did and what our brain needs, then we could just do the things it needs and feel so much better. So the brain has two main functions, two main general functions of our brain. And the two functions are, one is to survive and thrive, like to do whatever you need to survive biologically, right? And that makes sense, of course. And the second job of the brain is to conserve calories. Why, right? Well, we used to have to hunt for food and we used to have to scavenge for food. We used to have to find it out there and grow it or do a lot of work to get our food. And so we didn't want to make choices that burned too many calories in case we didn't have enough food. Now, it doesn't try to conserve calories when you don't have food. It conserves calories in case you don't have food. So for millions of years, humans roamed around this earth and went long time between meals sometimes because there was not enough, or you had abundance sometimes, and then you didn't have some for periods of time. So our brain had to do that, had to make decisions to have you resist doing jobs that might burn too many calories that wasn't for surviving and thriving. But of course, like shelter and finding food and, taking care of each other was to survive and thrive, or playing games was to survive and thrive. And so it was okay to do those things, if that makes sense. So now we have the grocery store, we have food in our cupboard. Hopefully I know not everyone does, but we have access to food. Most of us have access to food. We do not have to do all that work. And so we don't really need this feature. But of course, after being, this is like, 50 years we've had grocery stores at our disposal like this, and millions of years we've evolved to conserve calories. Don't forget. Okay. So both of these things are kicking your butt right now. So both of these things, that your brain wanting to survive and thrive makes it really highly trying to solve problems that sometimes aren't there, right? Because to survive and thrive, it's got to make sure everything's okay. And because everything's okay, it's like, oh, I must be missing something. I have to find something, right? And so, so the anxiety, the lies of anxiety, the things that anxiety is telling you to be afraid of, we believe it because we think we need to help ourselves survive, right? That's what's going on a biological level. So that's bothering you. And then the conserving calories things plays out in a lot of ways, especially with young people, because their brain's not really developed totally until like 26, when they start to get more of the big picture view, that immediate gratification thing is kicking in, right? So when they're given option of a task, their brains are immediately judging, is that for surviving and thriving, or do I have to conserve calories? So what do you think teens do when they have to do a chore, or when they have to do homework, or when they are faced with a test or something hard? They feel a biological resistance. So this is not them doing it. This is not culture doing it. This is not laziness. This is a biological resistance that comes up that says, I don't think you should do that. And it feels it. The thing is that we don't understand what that means. And we put all other kind of meaning on that's going on. We call this generation lazy, or we call them unmotivated, resistant. They get really indignant. Like when someone's telling them to do something, they feel like it's oppression on them, or someone's trying to control them, right? This is that biological resistance. And if they understood, and if you did, if we all understood what was going on, then we could override it without having it cause so much conflict. Because, teens aren't unmotivated. They're actually highly motivated to resist. So they got the motivation piece. They got the motivation piece online. And so if they understood, because who has heard their teenager say over and over again, I'm so tired. Why am I so tired? I'm so tired, especially when they're going to start their homework, right? Or especially when you say, I'm to the dishwasher. I'm so tired. So tired, Mom, right? That's this biological resistance kicking up. And they're thinking it means I'm exhausted. Something's wrong with me. I'm exhausted all the time. What's wrong with me? Right? And so they're starting to get this story and build this story that something's wrong with them. They're different than other people. They're less than. And then when you're facing life and thinking like, how am I going to do all this stuff? How am I going to succeed? And everyone else is succeeding but me. And it's this constant like comparison that's happening. And so when we understand what it is, when we understand that it's this biological resistance and not actual resistance and not obstinance and not laziness at all, and we knew that we could override it. So, as adults, we do override that stuff all the time. We're like, we got to clean the bathroom because no one else is going to clean it. Or we got to make dinner because no one else is going to make it, right? So, we do these tasks because we know in the big picture that we need them to survive and thrive, even if we don't want to do them. And with a maturing brain, that is a little bit harder. I mean, they're starting to get it, right? They're developing into that, but it's not fully online. So it's not like don't make them do stuff. Actually, it's the opposite. Now, if they've been doing chores all the time, and if they've been doing hard tasks all the time, that resistance goes down. So if they sweep the floor every day, they wouldn't be complaining. They wouldn't have that resistance so much because they'd realize that it only takes like 5 minutes and it's not even worth getting upset about, right? Their brain would be kind of rewired to not get upset about that. And when you think that everything is hard and I don't want to do anything and I have to do all the stuff I don't want to do, life stinks, actually. I mean, not in a like really depressing way, but just in like a heavy way, right? I mean, the other things come in and the anxiety comes in and the not liking yourself very much comes in. And that's what leads to the anxiety and depression. But just like feeling like you have to do all the stuff that you don't want to do is really, really heavy. But if you're used to doing it, people who, people who do chores all the time, they have less resistance just because they're used to it. So I hope that That is one thing that really has helped me as a parent. I forgot to say, like, I have 3 kids. My youngest just turned 18 and went out to college just like a couple weeks ago. So yeah, so I'm speaking from experience. I did have anxiety when I was young as well. And so I understood it. And that's why I've written 4 books on anxiety so far. But my kids have really struggled at different times and in different ways. So I know anxiety really tries to affect us in a bunch of different ways. Because it gives you different content. You know, there's different triggers. So sometimes people have like health anxiety, and sometimes people have, you know, anxiety, social anxiety, and there's different kinds of anxiety, but it's all the same animal. It's all working on you the same way by these, whatever these triggers are, triggering the amygdala and telling you there's something really to worry about. So now that you understand what's happening biologically, and now you understand what's happening culturally and evolutionarily, or whatever we want to call it, what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? And maybe you've already seen some threads of some hope in here. And when I explain it, of what to do, and I'm sure I can't stop but saying some of the opposite things as we're talking, but there are things that we could do to build resiliency in our kids. So I'll go over the 5, I'm sorry. In my first book, I did 6 steps to healing anxiety, but then I just shortened it down to 5. I combined the 5 and 6 in this book, but I want to tell you what they are now. So at least you have them. And I'll repeat them a couple of times because I know I don't have words. I know on Zoom, when you do screen share, I'm like in this little, you know, this little kind of square in the corner, and that's no fun, especially on a replay. So I'm just going to repeat them so you got them. So the 5 steps to healing anxiety, and anxiety is healable. Like, it's not like you just have to manage it, but you could get rid of it altogether. And that doesn't mean it doesn't ever come back in your life. That doesn't mean you have anxiety and you always have it and come back. It comes back because we have the amygdala, we have the sympathetic nervous system, right? So we do have adrenaline in our body. So it doesn't come back because you're the person who gets anxiety. It comes back because biologically we have this function in our body. And so when we're under stress, or there's, you know, perfect storm of something happening or some reminder of it, it could come back. But that doesn't mean you're not cured, because you just have to remember how you got rid of it the first time, and you could get rid of it like that day again. You cannot let it take you again. And that's how I teach people. I teach people to get rid of it, and we prepare. If something happens, if you get under stress and it comes back, because we're still humans and we still have the sympathetic nervous system, what to do about it so that it doesn't like take you down the spiral. All right. So 5 steps. 1 is understand anxiety. And that's what we covered mostly in this. I even go even deeper in my programs, in my book, but in my programs and in my book. 2 is learn the lies that it tells. You heard me refer a little bit to some of the lies anxiety tells. That's the tricks and the tactics of anxiety, is to try to get you to be upset about something that you don't need to be upset over. And you could argue this because you want to defend it. Like, anxiety has you believing it so much that you're defending, but this could happen. Yeah, but a lot of stuff could happen, right? So this remote possibility of this one thing happening is not any more or less than other scary things that you're not worried about. That's how we know it's lying. But sometimes it's just really obvious that it's lying. But when you hear all the common lies that anxiety tells, you see it in yourself, and you could kind of see them coming from a mile away. So it's kind of like deconstructing anxiety. Actually, the first 2 steps, like understanding anxiety and understanding the tricks and tactics of anxiety, those lies that it tells, really you are, you're taking the power away from anxiety. And that's why my anxiety help is different than other people's, because they're just teaching you skills. I do that. But first we got to take the power down so the skills actually work. You have skills. Your kids have skills. They are highly adaptive and they are amazing. They just have to see it. They just have to be reminded. And so, yeah. So 2 is learn the lies that it tells, and 3 is cultivate your control. So that's building up your personal agency. This is where we teach those skills to calm yourself, to get the anxiety down, to grow your confidence up. And so we're going to do that next. But 4 and 5, 4 is forgive yourself, because when you don't like yourself, you don't think that you don't trust yourself, and you don't think like you can handle anything. And so anxiety reigns. So you have to make peace with yourself. So people will still have anxiety, but they don't like themselves. They're not going to get rid of anxiety. You have to make peace with yourself, because it's connected. When you don't like yourself, you're going to have anxiety. And when you trust yourself and like yourself and have confidence in yourself, that's when anxiety really can't bother you anymore. So it's got to be part of the equation. And then number 5, the last one is practicing, that hardwiring your brain for happiness. That practices, these daily practices, are happiness habits that build resiliency. So those are the 5. So I'll do it again. Understand anxiety, learn the lies that it tells, cultivate your control, forgive yourself, like yourself, and then practice these happiness habits that build resiliency. So you could see you have a lot of it already, right? So all that cultivating your control is all that you get in all those YouTube videos, and how to calm yourself and all this great stuff, and how to build your confidence. And now let's talk about the really most important, the 5 most important habits to building your kids' resiliency. Or if you're a young person, yours, because I know we have parents, we have educators, we have therapists on here, we probably have nurses and other practitioners, and young people themselves are on here watching this. So something for everybody. Now, it's interesting, the brains of young people, yes, are different than brains of adults a little bit, but like these things work for all of us, right? These are going to help all of us feel better. And wouldn't it be great if there's a lot of people in your family experiencing anxiety, wouldn't it be great if you all felt better? That would be my dream for you. All right, so 5 ways to build resiliency in young people. And this is especially from COVID. What I didn't talk about in COVID is what added to it. So you have like modern times and conveniences, right? Modern conveniences kind of started us all in the first place. And then commercialism, because that is a real thing. And then then phones with the internet, and us on there all the time, and all these messages, right? And then COVID came along. And now during COVID, first of all, it felt very out of control and very uncertain. So it's triggered a lot of people's anxiety, of course. And then people got out of their routines. And then because there was less stimulation, kids had less neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters like endorphins that make you feel good, you need some stimulation for those. And people were a lot less stimulated for a good long time. Not everybody, but most people. And so we're seeing the consequences of that is what we're seeing now. Now, so these 5 things in resilience is going to build those back up again. Now, neurotransmitters, they could come back. This is not permanent damage. Of course, and in general, it was a bit of a collective trauma. So we're kind of all feeling that, and we're recovering from it, but we can recover from it, is what I'm saying. We can recover from the time when, I see you, Christine. I'm going to answer your question. Absolutely. So we can recover from what we lost during COVID. And I know we're seeing and really, really worried about our young people, and we need to believe in them, and we need to have confidence in them so they could see it. And we need to reflect back to them the skills that they have so that they can notice them too. I'm going to go through these 5, and then I'm going to answer Christine's question, and in that talk about, what as parents, what we want to think about the most. Okay, so we need routine. So our brains, to calm down, to have good mental health, to have good emotional wellness, we need routine. And all studies show that if we go to bed at the same time, we wake up around the same time, we eat the same time, we eat healthy, we do some movement, we make sure we have time to laugh and play. We have a good balance to our life. Routine helps our mental health exponentially. I can't emphasize this enough. If we have some routine, our mind doesn't have to always kind of be like, what's going on now? What's going on now? What's going on now? If we have some semblance, of course, we need flexibility, but if we have some bit of routine in our life, it does help. That's what threw us off during COVID. We lost our routines, and it really threw people's emotional wellness kind of off a little bit. We kind of got off kilter, and it made our brains want to question, and try to solve problems and create problems, right? So routine really helps settle the mind. It's like a decluttering of the mind. It like knows what's coming next and it flows. But there's something like biological that happens when you get enough sleep and when you sleep the same time every day. That's really good for overall wellness. And of course, we all know that we need to move our bodies, right? We need to get some physical exercise, and we know we need to eat well. Like, I don't have to tell you that, right? So that's one routine. The second thing that we need is novelty. So this is really, really an important piece, because this is what's going to stimulate those neurotransmitters. So our endorphins, like when we do something fun or pleasurable, we get a blast of endorphins, like, oh, that was cool. That felt really good. I want to do it again, right? That rat who keeps pushing down the handle to get the treats. So when we do something that stimulates us or is exciting or fun, we want to do it again. What happens when people are isolated or they're not doing much, they stop having those endorphins, and then they actually stop getting interested in things. So I don't know if anyone had a teen either during the quarantine time and pandemic time or now, or any time before that, who stopped doing a lot of things and then really stopped caring about things, or they're really isolated, like they don't go out that much, maybe they have anxiety and don't go out that much, and then they stopped really caring about ever feeling better. Like, I don't really care if I feel better or not. This is a symptom of the isolation. This is not a symptom of the depression. So this is caused by isolation. Yes, it contributes to the depression. So it's like this chicken and egg thing, right? Like the powerlessness makes us anxious, not the anxiety makes us feel powerless, right? So it's the isolation is actually causing the mental health problems. But when we have anxiety and depression, right away, we try to isolate ourselves. But the isolation exponentially makes it worse and worse and worse. So if you have someone who just doesn't care about feeling better, if you are caring for this person and love this person, get them out. Get them doing something, find something that's interesting to them, and you keep trying different things and different things and different things until you find something that triggers. And once it starts to trigger, they'll come back online. Once you start to trigger that endorphin. So we need novelty in our life. We need some kind of challenge. We need some kind of interest. We need some kind of content. So this is the difference, not content. This is the difference between watching content on social media and creating content on social media. So the kids that are just watching, passively watching stuff, they're not doing as okay as the kids that are creating the videos and making stuff and putting it out there, because they're trying to figure out the whole like dashboard and how to edit, and right there, it's a totally different way to interact. So learning something new and actually trying it, actually hands-on trying stuff, is going to kick on our brain and give us something to problem solve, right? Our prefrontal cortex has developed for so long to solve problems. You want to give it something to do. This goes right into the next one, which is creativity. So we need novelty, and we also need creativity. They're similar in some ways, but creativity is really what's going to use that prefrontal cortex. And when you have a really strong prefrontal cortex, which develops all the way to your 26 is when it's fully developed for most people, and the more creative you are and the more developed it is, your anxiety is going to go down. So at any age. So even if you're older, you want to do like puzzles and mind games and do different things, like engage in something that you have to. Creativity is actually solving problems, isn't it? Because if I was going to make a box out of wood, I'm like, okay, I need hinges. Now, should I put hinges on the outside and decorative? Should I put hinges on the inside and not show? Like, how do I attach the top, right? You're just making decisions and you're solving problems. And so if anyone is struggling with anxiety, try to engage in some kind of creativity. Yeah, we've stopped like knitting. And I mean, some people do, and they're feeling good. You notice during COVID, people were like making new recipes and things like that. Intuitively, people knew that they had to do something, right? They had to create and they had to stimulate themselves with something novel. But that was extreme situation, but this is all the time. It builds resilience in you, because when you start problem solving and when you start learning something new, you begin to see that you always can, but you begin to see it, you begin to know it. It's like you begin to confirm it, and then you have more confidence in that. So next is community. So 5, remember, I'm going to keep doing it because I don't have the words on the screen here. Routine, novelty, creativity. And next is community, because one of the biggest problems that we have as humans is isolation. We are social beings. And so we interact and we need social beings. So our brain is like, we need people to survive. Like if you were left out, back in, hunter-gatherer times, if you were left out, you died. You had to have a group, right? You couldn't survive in the world without the community. And so we are social beings because that's how we need to survive. So our brain doesn't do well in isolation. And what happens is that we get negative. So we have the capacity for so much thought. We have the capacity for so much, to problem solve, to have so much thought in our mind, and we don't need it all right now in modern times. And so a lot of it turns negative. But when you're around other people, you can make jokes about that, or it leaves you out of that and you get out of your head a little bit. When you're alone, you're just sitting in that soup of negativity. And it's not a good place to be alone. Your mind is not a good place to be alone. You want to be with other people. Plus, we're self in relationship. So we only see ourselves as reflected off the people around us. And so if we don't have that, or if we're around people that are negative, it doesn't do well for our self-concept and our self-esteem. And what a great keynote would be is talking about teen relationships, because so many young people, I'm talking about preteens and teens, are in not good relationships, are in relationships that are abusive, that maybe don't explicitly look abusive, but they are not good relationships. And I think we really have to spend some time helping. This causes a lot of anxiety and depression in long term. And so we really have to get the message out in schools to have people making better decisions about their relationships. This is really, really important. So last but not least, so we got routine, we got novelty, we got creativity, we got community, and last but not least, purpose. We need a sense of purpose. So in every happiness and longevity research project, purpose and community, right? Having people around you that lift you up, and a purpose to your life is by far the highest things and the most important things for personal happiness and living long. Because if you're happy, you stay healthy, right? Physically as well. So when you're emotionally happy, or when you're emotionally well, your body is going to respond and be, stress really affects us bodily too. So making things worth it. So even if you struggle, if they're worth it because it means something, because you're doing something with it, it matters, like we want to matter. And if we don't matter, we feel unworthy and we feel untethered, and it's not a good place for our mental health. So if you want to build resiliency in kids, these are the 5 things I want you to think about. Think about helping them create a routine of self-care and self-structure, helping them get some novelty into their days and into their weeks, helping them get that stimulation, wanting to learn something new, wanting to challenge themselves. And then creativity, having some kind of creative outlet. I saw this meme today about the phone. It's like, when we hand kids their phone, we take away their boredom. Like we've kind of robbed them of boredom. And in the past, like having boredom makes you, I don't know, try to play something or make something up or design something, or right. When we're bored, like we respond to that boredom by doing something. And when they have and I'm not like against phones or anything like that, might sound like that, but I just thought it was a cool meme and interesting. because then we get creative. Forgot which one I was at. Creative community, get people out of isolation, and then a sense of purpose. So those are the ways to do it. Let me take a little breath and a little drink of water and read some of these Q&As. So get to typing. I'm going to answer some of these. And if you have any other questions, we have lots of time for that. And if you have any feedback at all, that's great too. But Christine says, can you talk through how these tools and skills can be taught to preteens? Absolutely. In the same exact kind of way. I talk to preteens the same way. I explain to them the stuff and I get really animated and, I've learned to kind of explain it in a way that, using the vocabulary that they'd understand. Or if I'm using some vocabulary that they don't understand, I'll explain what it is, like the amygdala or something like that. And, sometimes when I'm working with young people, even if it's like fourth grade or something, fifth grade, sometimes you have to explain things and you give a lot of metaphor. So you would, you'd be like, if you're going down the river and then you're, you tell like the parables or the stories, the person who keeps fishing the things out of the river instead of going down the river and stopping whoever's throwing the junk in the river, that kind of a thing. Give them a metaphor to help them really paint a picture of it. A metaphor works in several ways because we're storytellers, right? Humans are naturally storytellers, but it gives us, so not only does it help paint a picture for us to illustrate it, it also gives us a little bit of distance. And so when we see stuff from a distance, we get a better perspective. We're outside our own fear. We're outside our own emotions. Our emotions go down and we could really hear it in a different kind of way. So I would definitely tell them all about the brain and all about this stuff. And you might have to repeat it a lot more times because they're a little bit younger, their concepts are developing, right? So we have conceptual development. And when they're young, people don't have the concepts, and they're in grade school, they start getting the concepts and they start to be more and more complex of the concepts. And so you simplify them, and some are a little bit complex and they're kind of on the edge, and they'll ask questions. And you can check in with them about what they did, what they understand, and kind of keep that going. What I really like to do also is if you're watching show with them, if you're watching TV show with them, a lot of times we talk about the characters. If you talked about the characters in the show or something, it's another way to give them a little bit of a distance so they could understand a concept. It's illustrated for them. And so they're not feeling judged or thinking they're in the hot seat or whatever like that. They're seeing it through someone else's eyes, and that could be really helpful as well. Christine, feel free to ask a follow-up question if I didn't get, if you want something specific. So Lainey says, could you touch on symptoms of high functioning anxiety? The super student or employee, then when this starts to be pathological, what you see versus what I feel. Okay. So high functioning anxiety is a term that's kind of come into pop culture a little bit more because of perfectionism. In our Western culture, we have these expectations and these cultural norms that we all have to live up to. You have to be young and pretty and cool and smart and rich and, let's face it, white. There's all these cultural things that people are judging themselves against, and it's hugely problematic in a lot of ways. So, justly, of course, injustice happens because of it. And also emotional problems happen because of it. So people are perfectionists because we have these high expectations that we have to meet, and we're not really sure about them because we don't really know. They're not really well defined. We just have them. They're just high. They're unrealistic and crazy. And so we're not sure. And if we don't meet them, that people are going to leave us out. And so we have to supersede them to make sure we meet them because we really don't know what the limit is. So this is perfectionism, right? There is no perfection, right? You can't ever achieve it. So you're just going to keep trying and always failing. So there's a couple of things that's playing out with high functioning anxiety. A lot of times people are, if you're talking about adults, you're talking about like all day long, they're in a high position job and they work in their final day. And then they come home and they have anxiety and they're like, what is going on? It's because they're playing off their adrenaline all day. It's working for them, right? They have adrenaline going all day and they're using it to do their problem solving and they're doing amazing, amazing stuff. And they come home and their adrenaline's still going, but they don't have anything to think about because they're like trying to turn their brain off. And then but with that, then they start to be like, this is weird, something's wrong, blah, blah, blah. And then they go down that path of thinking something's wrong with me and this doesn't feel good and this is awful and what's wrong, right? But if they understood, oh, my adrenaline's still going, I have to do this to get my adrenaline down. I have to override it, whatever. Oh, thanks, Amygdala, if I need to do that was great all day, but now I'm good. Like if you're not afraid of the feeling, it would go away. And so if they understood that. So when we're talking, I do talk about perfectionism a lot in my book. It's a huge problem in Western culture where we think that we have to have these unrealistic expectations. And I think we really have to just call it out and really have them understand it. Again, use metaphor, use kids in shows or something like that. And to really describe it. Because when they're talking about themselves, sometimes they're so close to the chaos of what's going on that they can't listen. And so it's a good thing to do that. So the strong work ethic is good, but then there's this unrealistic pressure that changes. And sometimes that anxiety doesn't actually help performance. It actually hurts performance. And that's usually my way forward with my clients. So if they are having a lot of anxiety to like do on the test or do it well, or the homework or whatever, we really talk about and deconstruct that anxiety is not actually helpful. It doesn't, because you think that, because they think if I'm not stressed, then I wouldn't be motivated and I wouldn't do it. They're deciding to keep that anxiety, right? They think it's good for them somehow. And so they're consciously making a decision. If I didn't have this anxiety, I wouldn't get good grades. That's not actually true. You're getting good grades despite the anxiety because you're a really smart person and you work really hard, but you could do all of that without the stress. So you teaching them to like get in the flow of doing work. Because let's face it, like if you have this big assignment and you're stressed about this assignment and you're stressed and you're stressed and you're stressed about the assignment, and you're stressed about the assignment, a lot of times people put it off, but the perfectionist will do it over and over and over. It's like you did the assignment a million times. You're exhausted. You only need to do it once, right? In your head, you do it over and over because when something's in your imagination and when you're anxious about something, it's like doing the work. Your mind is like doing the work. So, yeah. And control is a facade, isn't it? It's like, and this is the thing is like a lot of times anxiety people will say, or people who try to help people with anxiety say, like, you have no control, just like let go of control. Like, don't tell an anxious person that. Remind them that like we have 100% of control over the thing that matters most in our life, our personal agency, right? Things happen to us, but we have 100% of control about how we respond to those things. And that response actually is more important than what happens to us. Of course, what happens to us affects us. Of course it does. Absolutely. But our response actually matters more in our lifetime happiness, in our relationships with people, in our mindset and how we function and in our mental health, especially. So, so that's the important piece is like, they're trying to grab control. That's not sustainable control. They're trying to grab control. I call it pseudo control. So they're trying to get control in situations or get control over themselves or get control over other people. And it's not sustainable. And so they're still anxious and they still have to keep grabbing control. But when we teach them to connect with their personal agency and when we teach them to connect and trust themselves and build that resiliency, then that's sustainable control and they won't have anxiety, right? They don't have to keep grabbing it, if that makes sense, because they'll be like, oh, this is what it feels like. This is what I trust myself. Because that trying to get control and that grabbiness is, it's anxiety and you keep grabbing it and it slips through your fingers because you can't sustain perfectionism because you never meet it. So you have to keep trying, right? So it's not really, really good. Yeah. I mean, I hope that Lainey I'm addressing those things. Lainey's giving me some examples here, like always in control. You feel like something will go wrong if I don't do everything myself. Yeah. I mean, this is like control issues are anxiety issues. That's all they are. And so that's what is playing out. I'm going to move on and maybe come back to it, Lainey, if you have a follow-up question there. Julie says, what are your thoughts on taking phones away from older teens, 16, 17, for a period of time to let the boredom to bring out the creativity? Yeah. You notice addictive behavior and have a history of anxiety. I guess I would get them on board a little bit. Like if it's a punitive thing, then maybe they'll have some resistance. And then in the end, they actually like it. A lot of times kids like freak out and then they come to therapy the next week and they're like, actually, I feel better. I like it not having a phone. They do flip the switch. A lot of them do. So yeah, have them do experiments. Like, what if you go take a walk without your phone for a little while, or let's have an experiment, ask them how they feel. When they've done research studies on teenagers who are away from their phone for an hour or so, like that short of time, they do respond saying that they feel better. And so when you're sharing with them this kind of information, then especially if you're close with your kids and you see them getting really, really anxious and comparing themselves and talking about their friends and that kind of stuff, and then they take a break and you ask them again, they'll see that they're making a difference. And I mean, we're not going to get rid of our kids' phones forever. If you can delay as much as you could delay for a young person, that's great. But, or if you somehow have other things in their life where they're away from their phone a little bit because they're in some kind of activity, that's really helpful. Or if you really encourage them to have some kind of hobby or some kind of thing that they're doing. So when they are already addicted to phone, you might have to really entice them over here with something, or show them this research and say, we should try it. Let's try to do a half hour. Let's see what happens. Let's see how we feel. Let's test. Like inviting them into an experiment could be kind of fun. Anonymous said, this has been great. I love the explanation of the amygdala and how it works. I never heard of the GABA. Yeah, the GABA hormone is awesome. There's a lot of ways you could raise your GABA. Sometimes with some food, you can raise your GABA hormone, but things like the Wonder Woman, if you stand really tall and like spread eagle with your body. If you look out the sides of your body, the sides of your eyes, because amygdala gives you your adrenaline gives you like tunnel vision, right? Because you have to like focus and find out what's wrong and solve that and not pay attention to anything else so you could survive, right? So if you do things that tell your brain that you're not in danger, because if you were in danger, you'd be like this, right? And if you're not in danger, you'd be like open, right? If you're soft body, your front of your body, you have to cover it if you're in danger, right? But if you're opened up like this, even if you sit with your arms open like this, you're telling your brain that you're not in danger and your GABA hormone's going to kick off. But when you see yourself taking action, when your brain groks that you're taking some kind of action, the GABA hormone releases. So it's awesome. Any recommendation? I can't talk. I'm so excited. Any recommendations for someone with anxiety related to driving? I do have a driving anxiety program online, so it's a couple of videos, but also audios that people could listen to, because it's interesting. We use the metaphor of being behind the wheel as being in control. And so I play on that metaphor a lot and get them to really be present and think about the control that they have. Because a lot of times with driving, you focus on, in general, anxiety wants us to see all the things that are out of control, but there's infinite number of things that are in our control that we're not thinking about, because anxiety is like a beacon for our attention about all these things that are out of our control. But the things that are in our control are much more important, much more meaningful, meaningful to like how things are going to go. And so that's what I'm kind of switching. And actually, my program for driving anxiety is if you go to my website, jodyaymond.com, and just hit the shop at the top, or courses. I can't remember what the navigation thing is, but you learn about anxiety, you learn about the amygdala, you learn about all these things. So you could help other anxieties too. This is the thing, when you help one anxiety, you could get rid of other anxieties. They're the same animal. They work on you the same way. Driving anxiety is so common because, yeah, we're just focused. When kids are starting to drive, when teens are starting to drive, I notice they're really anxious. But once they start doing it, because it's unfamiliar, it seems overwhelming, and there's all these people that are like out of your control. But when they start doing it, that anxiety goes away. But a lot of times they don't want to do it because they're anxious about it. But I always encourage them, just try, because tons of kids are anxious. And then when they drive a little bit, their anxiety goes away. You need to be familiar. Even if you haven't gone to school in a long time, or you haven't done public speaking in a long time or something, the anxiety about it, because it's unfamiliar, actually really grows. And it's only in doing it and becoming familiar with it that the anxiety goes down. Okay. I know we have about 12 minutes left, and so I'm going to keep going here. So I got Julie, I got a couple things. Oh, good. Okay. So I don't have one more question. So there's some time for if somebody wants to quickly type another question in here, I'm going to answer Julie's. So what do you know about anxiety that appears during perimenopause? Anxiety during menopause is like the whole 10 years. I don't think of it as a peri, but menopause, like your estrogen and your progesterone are, the balance of them is different. And so a lot of times we have estrogen dominance during that time. And so it's because their progesterone has gone down. Sorry, my nose itches. So, estrogen causes adrenaline. So high estrogen causes people to have a lot of adrenaline. And even in young people, we're seeing this, yes, even in 30s or 40s or during menopause, but also during puberty, also during pregnancy, right? But also because of some of the food we eat and some of the toxins we eat, we're all a little heavy on the adrenaline, on the estrogen. Stress increases our estrogen. And then when you have an increase of estrogen, you get more stressed. So if you have stress in your life, you're going to have probably excess estrogen in your life, and that will cause you to be a little more susceptible to the adrenaline. So you want to bring the adrenaline down, you want to bring the estrogen down, you want to do some self-care or do some things to bring your anxiety down, and then it's bring your anxiety down and then your anxiety will go down. But that's why it is so connected. So I hope that's, that might be why. It might be high estrogen. I sometimes I eat I'm feeling a little bit off or bloated or something like that, because I am 50. I often go on a low estrogen diet for a little while to kind of regulate myself. And that helps me tremendously, even with my mood and my mental health. So, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Virginia. So Virginia says, can anxiety in an 8-year-old show as crankiness and defiance? Absolutely. Right? Because they don't know they're anxious. They just know they're uncomfortable, or they don't want to. They're resistant. They don't want to go to that thing because they feel really uncomfortable. They think they're going to be uncomfortable and stuck there. And of course they're going to resist going. And so they might say, I don't want to, or they may say, they'll use all kinds of different words. And you do not have to teach them this is anxiety. If they're an 8-year-old, you just go with whatever they're calling it, but you know that they might be worried about not liking it, or being uncomfortable, or being whatever. Maybe it's social, maybe it's whatever it is. Anxiety is like a trap feeling. Anxiety is a hallmark of anxiety is feeling trapped. So often people, if kids are having anxiety, they don't want to do something because they think they'll be stuck there and won't be able to leave. And so that is why an 8 comes out as anger. So a lot of times anger, even if someone is an abuser, that's anxiety, right? They're dysregulated and they're having anxiety, so they have to get power over somebody else. So that's why young kids, when they have anxiety, they try to get power over you by like demanding or being cranky or being mad or yelling at you or telling you you're a terrible mom or something like that. I would say it's all, you don't have to say you have anxiety right now. You just have to be like, well, what's going on? You might have to disrupt that somehow by somehow trying to get them to talk about those feelings so they could get those out, so you could reassure them or whatever that you have to do that might help them calm down. But it definitely is not personal. That's one thing. So when they're attacking you personally because they're feeling anxious, and all ages, kids do this. If you cannot take it personal and realize that is their anxiety trying to push you away, so the anxiety could keep wreaking havoc on your kids. So Margaret says, do I talk about ADHD and anxiety in my book? I guess a little bit. A lot of times they're misconstrued for each other. A lot of times people, either they have both, and I know that from experience, they have both, or one is confused for the other one. Anxiety comes with a lot of other problems. And so especially problems that make us feel less than, like ADHD, right? Problems that make you feel like you're different, or that you're less than, or that you can't handle stuff or whatever. Problems that affect your worth, which is all problems, like ADHD. So I can't remember really too much, but sensory issues. So people with ADHD or people on the spectrum or something, maybe have sensory issues. And I know I have 6 minutes left here, but so you still might feel nuggets. You still might get nuggets for help with that. Anonymous says, thoughts on kids and anxiety and ADHD. Can the ADHD be healed too? I think ADHD looks like a lot of different things. And I'm learning a little bit more now that there's like two opposite kinds of ADHD. One is like, you can't see the thing done, and so you don't know how to take steps to do it. And the other one is you could see it done, and then you just take for granted that you don't have to do any steps and don't do any steps. So it's just like people with ADHD have so many different kinds of ways it manifests. So it's a bit hard. So people could do workarounds for the ADHD. There's a lot of, and that's not my specialty, actually. So I don't want to comment too much, but you kind of have to find out what are the biggest issues for the person with ADHD, and then find those workarounds. I know there's cool podcasts now, and there's different things because if you have ADHD, you're not reading. So that's really exciting. How do you get her to talk about it? Like you're talking about the 8-year-old, forgot Virginia. Oh yeah, 8-year-old. I guess I'd see what are you thinking is going to happen there? If you're trying to get her to do stuff, she doesn't want to do it and is resistant and cranky. What do you think might happen there? What do you picture? Like try to see if you could get her to come out with like, what is the visualization that she's trying to resist happening? And so that might be really helpful, hopefully, is to like disrupt it and try to get her to talk like, any upsetness, any anxiety, pain, anger, violence, whatever it is, it's always like there's something always implicit in there, right? That's expressed, but it's always expressing something that's precious, something that's really important and precious. And we want to, as parents, ask about that. And it cuts through any of that anger so that they could really talk about, and we're also modeling for them to like tell what they feel instead of expressing the anger and yelling at people. So let me take this as the last one, this anonymous here. Do you have suggestions to a teen to buy into the idea of doing steps to heal and build resilience? I bought a book for her last year and they never touched it. I have a pretty good counselor. What else can I do? I think you need to find something to stimulate, like I said. Like I would say, let's get those endorphins flowing as much as we can, because like there's a little hopelessness feeling or a little giving up. Like I just don't care if I get better, right? I don't see it happening. I don't think it'll happen. I don't really care if it happens. I hear that a little bit in this. I'm not sure. Of course, that's a whole spectrum as well. I guess I would find something they're interested in, and it might be like it might have to be, you know, if this is feasible, it could be even like starting out with like retail therapy or something like that. Like sometimes that's a good spark to kind of kick some of it off if they get something, and then hopefully it's something they could do something with. And you know, you want to find like some kind of hobby or some kind of purpose, something that is important to them. So your job is to find something that matters. And that's our counselor's job too. So when I work with someone who doesn't care about feeling better, I have to come up with a definition that she wants to take a stand against whatever's going on, or else I really can't go anywhere in therapy, right? I have to have her be like, I have to have my client want to do something. Have to want something, and everybody wants something. And sometimes it takes a while for someone to figure out what somebody wants because they've been kind of suppressing it so long, or not had stimulation so long. And like, and so I just have to keep doing the work of trying to find something that interests them. So yeah, a lot of pressure. I know. My youngest just went to college, so I know that the last couple of years, woo, and this year too, big time. So I'm glad that I helped everyone. Thank you so much for all the questions. Hi, Melissa.
Hi. Thank you for this, Jody. It was great, getting lots of positive feedback. Thank you, everyone. This was recorded and will be available for rewatch on the TPOD website and through Trumbull Community Television. Thank you, Jody, for all that wonderful information, all those wonderful question answers. Thank you for attending. Have a great night, everybody.